Chapter 10. Pastry Magics. At some point, when people had grouped into ones and twos to discuss Wolfstar's words, the enchanter himself had disappeared. Zenith, who'd made sure to keep a close eye on him, had no idea how he'd done it. He'd been close to the fireplace, but she could have sworn he had not stepped back into it. Neither had he used any song of movement, because she would have felt it if he had done so. He was there one heartbeat, gone the next, and Zenith had allowed herself to breathe a little more easily. Of the others, Drago had been the next to leave, his exit far more noticeable. He'd pushed bluntly past those in his way and stalked from the room, every eye following him. Zenith felt for Drago, and wished she'd had the courage Zared showed in leaping to his defense when Riverstar's cruel tongue had been working its damage. Zenith had felt so ashamed that she'd later made the effort to join in the conversation, even asking Wolfstar a question. He'd stared at her, but this time there had been nothing but the stare, nothing but the roiling yet unreadable emotion in his eyes. Once Drago had gone, the rest of the group had been fairly quick to break up. There was much to be discussed and debated in the privacy of individual chambers, and even breakfasts to be had, for the initial shock of Wolfstar's appearance, and then his news, had long gone, and stomachs were now complaining. Most of the servants within Sigholt, as well as the heads of the five and their advisors, were busy with preparations for council, which was to commence the next morning, so Zenith spent most of the day with Leah. She felt restless and useless in the current hive of activity, and Leah was always comfortable company. Zenith told Leah all that had happened in Salem's chambers, for she thought the woman had as much right to know as ask him or Zared, and then she asked what had transpired between her and Zared the night previously. "Oh, Zenith, I saw more of him last night than I swear I have in the past 4 years. Thank you. Thank you." Leah's eyes had glimmered with emotion, and Zenith had to fight back the tears herself. Having passed the evening meal with Leah, Zenith wandered back to her own chamber, but could not settle. Every time a drape moved in the draught, or a shadow flickered, Zenith jumped, thinking it was Wolfstar. She was sure he would come after her. Why use that phraseology? Why? She could not tell. But something in his touch, something in his eyes. He wanted something from her. But what? Surely it was not lust, for what Wolfstar had shown her was not the wantonness he'd displayed with Riverstar, but something else, something deeper. But that was ridiculous. She'd never met him. She was sure. Wolfstar had disappeared long years before she'd even been born. Why would he spare her even a passing thought? She was nothing in the power games and mysteries currently being played out in Tensendor. The images, memories, that had flooded Zenith's mind when Wolfstar touched her cheek, now came back and assailed her again, though with less force this time. She'd seen the inside of the Dome of Stars, but that was the province only of the first priestess of the temple, and Zenith had never been there. She'd seen inside that peasant hut, seen the angry, nameless man advance on her, murder in his eyes, but neither had she seen hut nor man previously. And the child, who? Zenith shook herself. She would go mad left alone in this room to think. She wondered again about Drago, how he felt after enduring his own personal trauma that morning, and determined to find him. She found him, as she thought she would, in the kitchens. Riverstar goaded Drago about his affairs with the kitchen girls, but Zenith knew the real reason Drago spent so much time in the kitchens of Sigholt. She'd discovered his secret one night 7 years ago when she could not sleep and had thought to heat herself a glass of warm milk. She'd come to the kitchen doors and then halted, astounded. Drago had been standing at one of the work tables, dicing a huge mound of vegetables. For some obscure reason, Drago loved to cook. He spent an hour or two down there most days, and longer if he was particularly upset over something. It was no mystery to Zenith that he would be here now. This late at night the fires were damped down, and staff had long gone to bed. Even so, the air was still, warm, and the great metal ranges against the far wall radiated a comforting glow. Drago was standing at a table before one of the ranges, several bowls before him, the tabletop strewn with flour and pieces of discarded meat. Drago? His head whipped up and a bowl rattled as he jumped. What is it? Zenith walked farther into the room. I thought you might like to talk about this morning. Her brother dropped his eyes and kneaded some dough in a bowl, unspeaking. Zenith walked over to the range, keeping her wings carefully tucked away, but rubbing her hands before its warmth. What did you think about Wolfstar? Drago did not answer. Now Zenith hugged her arms to herself, her eyes focused. He scares me, Drago. I did not like the way he looked at me, the way he touched me. I'm sure there are some dozen or more people within Sigholt today who could say they do not like the way Wolfstar looks at them. He still had not raised his eyes from the bowl. Zenith studied Drago carefully. He was kneading dough as if he wanted to bruise it. Drago, she hesitated, but thought it needed to be discussed. How did it make you feel to learn the name of Wolfstar's son? Drago lifted the mass of dough out of the bowl and slammed it down on the table, sending flour drifting in a cloud about him. He lifted his eyes and stared at Zenith. If he did not lie, and from the tales we've heard we know how Wolfstar can lie, then all I can say is that Dragonstar is a cursed name, both of us condemned to our different deaths. Drago, except that I think Wolfstar's son died far more gently than I. He started to roll the dough back and forth. Drago, I do not want to talk about it. He chopped the dough in two with the side of his hand, played at shaping one of the pieces into pie crust, then suddenly threw it into a corner of the kitchen with all the strength he could. I do not want to talk about it. Damn you, Drago, you must talk sometime. Drago rounded on her. Look at you, Zenith. You are beautiful, vital, and revel in your enchanter powers. You have an eon to live. Look at me. His fingers pinched his body, then his face. Look at me. I am wrinkling and aging. I get out of breath climbing the stairs to the roof. All the magic I can perform is getting this arse-blasted lump of pastry to rise in the oven. And all I ever hear about this cursed keep is how vile I am, how much air is wasted on my breath, and how I can never be trusted or loved or relied upon. Unable to bear her brother's pain, Zenith lowered her eyes and toyed with the handle of a pot in the ranged hot plate. She could not blame Drago for feeling angry or resentful. No one in their family seemed willing to harbor a single positive thought for the man, or to consider that perhaps he had been punished enough. No one seemed to entertain the idea that Drago might be so consumed by bitterness that his very punishment might drive him to ill-considered action. And no one save she had ever seemed to think through the implications of what Azure had done to him. Ikari babies were very different from human babies, in that they were completely aware from the moment of their birth, indeed, many months before it. All Ikari memories stretched back to the events pre-birth, but when Drago was only a few months old, Azure had stripped him of his Ikari heritage, and plunged his mind into the dim murkiness of human infancy. Drago's memories could not date from anything earlier than his 2nd or 3rd year of life. Drago would have no memory of the events that had seen him so cruelly punished. He was largely reviled, mistrusted, unloved, and above all, condemned to a life of only some 3 or 4 score of years, when he could have expected hundreds at least, for a crime he could not even remember. No one cared about how Drago might be feeling, or what kind of man lay buried beneath all the years of built-up bitterness. Zenith alone of the immediate family rather liked Drago, perhaps because she'd not yet been conceived when he had arranged Salem's kidnapping. Drago had sharp wit, and was, in odd, unexpected moments, kind and thoughtful. He is trapped here in Sigholt, Zenith realized suddenly, trapped by other people's memories of what he did as a child, as I am trapped by another's memories. Zenith went ice cold. Was that what it was? Why she had such unexplained memories invading her mind? Were they someone else's? But whose? Perhaps we should both leave Sigholt for a while, she said softly. What? Drago had given up his efforts at cooking, and was piling bowls into the sink with loud, angry rattles. Drago, how long is it since you left Sigholt? Zenith moved forward, but stopped as Drago's face tightened. I don't think you've left in at least 8 years, Drago. Why? He stared at her, not answering. There is nothing keeping either of us here. Why don't we visit Stardrifter, escape the tensions in this keep? Why would you want to leave? Why indeed? Zenith almost said because of Wolfstar, but stopped, knowing she couldn't explain to Drago, let alone herself, her deep-seated fright of the enchanter, her unsettling visions, or her recurring gaps in consciousness. Because there is a world of purpose out there, she said eventually, and because neither of us has a purpose here. If I have no purpose, it is because my life has been made deliberately purposeless. I am not trusted enough to be given the responsibility of purpose. Then why not leave, Drago? Stardrifter would enjoy seeing both of us. He looked at her, his violet eyes soft, almost gentle in this light. And she knew he was remembering the image of Stardrifter she had conjured up, and the happy months they had spent on the island of mist and memory as children. I have no purpose anywhere, he finally said, his voice weary with resignation. Wherever I go, I will always be the vile traitor. You can remake your life if you leave Sigholt. Please, Drago. He seized her shoulders, and Zenith was astounded to see tears in his eyes. I can never escape, Zenith. Never. Word would spread that Axis's untrustworthy and evil son, Drago, is traveling the land. Doors everywhere would be closed to me. I have no life here in Sigholt, but I would have no life anywhere. Now, will you leave me alone? And he strode from the kitchen.